The elevator doors parted, and the last thing Julian Cade did before stepping out was toss his gym bag into the chest of the old doorman standing at attention by the marble column. "Catch," he said, though he'd already let go. Elias Vantree caught it without looking, the way a man catches a habit he never asked to keep. He set it down at his feet, folded his hands behind his back, and said nothing. "You're fast for an old man," Julian said, grinning at the three friends filming him with their phones raised like torches. "Faster than you look, anyway. Slow down there, Gramps. You'll throw your back out being useful." The lobby of the Ashcombe Hotel went on humming around them, a bellhop wheeling brass luggage, the espresso machine hissing behind the concierge desk, tourists arguing softly about a dinner reservation. Nobody but the three boys with phones seemed to notice that Julian Cade, 23 years old and undefeated in 9 professional fights, had just shoved a 60-year-old doorman's bag into his ribs for the pleasure of a laugh. "Careful," Elias said, voice even. "Marble's slick this morning. Somebody could fall. Somebody like you mean." Julian laughed at his own joke, the kind of laugh that expected an audience and got one. He turned and walked toward the private elevator that led up to the Ashcombe Athletic Club, the members-only gym on the 14th floor where his father had installed a full mixed martial arts training room for his son's exclusive use, complete with a ring, a cage, and a wall of mirrors Julian never got tired of. Elias picked the bag back up, brushed it off, and set it on the bellhop cart as if it belonged there. Then he went back to his post at the door, hands folded, spine straight, watching the traffic roll by on Larimer Street like he had for the last 11 years. Nobody who watched Elias Vantree work the door of the Ashcombe would have guessed there was anything unusual about him. He was lean in the way rope is lean, with a gray mustache trimmed close and knuckles that looked older than the rest of him, swollen faintly at the joints in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with a life lived before this one. He opened car doors. He remembered names. He tipped his cap to the mail carrier every single day at 11:15, rain or shine, because the mail carrier had once told him nobody ever said good morning to her, and Elias had decided that oversight was going to end. But watch him long enough, and strange details surfaced. He never let his weight settle fully onto his heels. When a valet lost his grip on a set of car keys one afternoon and they went spinning off the counter, Elias's hand closed around them before the sound of the drop had finished. "Nice reflexes," the valet said. Elias only nodded, the way a man nods when he's decided a compliment isn't worth correcting. He lived alone in a 2-bedroom rental on the east side of the city, a house that had been meant for a family of 3 and had shrunk over the years to fit a family of 1. On the mantel sat a single photograph, turned face down, dusted around its edges, but never lifted. In the closet of the second bedroom, the one that had once had a twin bed and a corkboard covered in metals, sat a wooden trunk with a brass clasp. The key hung from a chain against his sternum, under his shirt, warm from his body and cold to its purpose. He had not turned it in 6 years. Some nights he sat on the edge of the bed with the trunk on his knees and did not open it. He only listened to the house being quiet around him. Julian Cade trained at the Ashcombe like the gym owed him something. 23, undefeated, the kind of prospect that combat sports networks built entire highlight packages around. His father, Roman Cade, owned 40% of the hotel and had personally overseen the installation of the 14th floor gym, a monument in glass and rubber flooring that existed for exactly one purpose, making sure his son never had to train anywhere he couldn't be filmed. Talent, in Julian, was not in question. He hit like a door slamming. What was in question was everything else. He had 340,000 followers who replayed his knockouts in slow motion and called him the next great thing. And Julian had come to believe them with the same certainty other men reserve for gravity. The hotel's general manager, a nervous, immaculately dressed man named Grant Wexler, had 2 priorities: keep the lobby spotless and keep the KDs happy. Whenever Julian's jokes turned cruel in front of guests, Grant found something urgent to review on his tablet, until the moment passed. Nadia Osman worked the concierge desk and saw everything the cameras didn't catch. She liked Elias. He remembered which guests needed the wheelchair ramp and which ones needed to be left alone. He never once in 3 years asked her to cover for him so he could leave early, and he always covered for her when her son had a fever. One evening in early spring, Nadia watched a boy of about 10 sitting cross-legged against the lobby's marble planter, waiting for his mother, who bussed tables at the hotel restaurant until close. The boy, Desmond, everyone called him, though Nadia had never learned his last name, had a black eye he was trying to hide under a baseball cap, and he sat there throwing slow, sloppy punches at nothing. His wrist bent wrong every time. Elias passed with the luggage cart and stopped. He didn't say anything. He crouched, moved the boy's back foot 2 inches, straightened his wrist with one finger, and lowered his chin with a light touch under the jaw. Then he stood and pushed his cart on toward the loading dock as if nothing at all had happened. Desmond threw the same punch again. It cracked through the air like something breaking cleanly for the first time. Nadia's phone buzzed in her hand, forgotten. She watched the boy stare at his own fist like he'd just met it, and that was the night she started wondering, quietly, who had taught the old doorman to build a fighter with 2 fingers and a look. The incident that made it to 11 million views happened on a Saturday. Julian had just come off his 9th win, a first-round finish streamed live from a Denver arena, and he brought the afterglow back to the Ashcombe along with 40 of his followers, who crowded the lobby waiting for a glimpse of him. He obliged them. He replayed the finish on his phone for anyone who'd watch, twice, then got bored the way champions get bored, restless for a new stage. The new stage was standing at the door in a doorman's uniform, holding it open for an elderly couple with a smile that never wavered. "There he is," Julian said, loud enough to turn heads. "Everybody, this is the guy who thinks I'm slow." He crossed the lobby, grinning at his phone's camera, and shoved Elias with both hands, hard enough that the older man's shoulder caught the doorframe, and he went down onto one knee. The lobby laughed. Somebody said, "Get up, Gramps, you're blocking the door." Somebody else said, "This is the best content you've made all week, Jules." Elias rose the way old men rise, when pride is the heaviest thing in the room, joint by joint. He straightened his jacket. He did not look at Julian. He picked his cap up off the marble, set it back on his head, and returned to his post as if a stranger had merely brushed past him. Only one person in the lobby wasn't laughing. Desmond stood by the elevator bank with his mother's apron in his hands, watching the man who'd fixed his stance get treated like furniture. Elias caught the boy's eyes for half a second, then looked away, because some things hurt worse than a bruised shoulder. By that night, the clip had 200,000 views. Julian posted it with a laughing emoji and the caption "When the old man forgets his place." In the comments, 4 people out of several thousand asked if he was okay. Across the city, in a house built for 3, Elias Vantree sat on the edge of his bed with the wooden trunk on his knees. His thumb found the brass lock and, for the first time in 6 years, turned the key. Inside lay 3 things. A folded gi, sun-faded at the shoulders from a decade of Saturday classes. A photograph of 4 people, a broad-shouldered man, a woman with her hair pulled back, a girl grinning under a banner that read Regional Finals, and a small, outdated phone kept charged out of a habit Elias never explained to anyone. Because carriers still let you pay to keep a dead number breathing if you asked nicely enough and paid on time. He looked at all 3 for a long while. He touched none of them. Near 2 in the morning, he closed the trunk, locked it, and hung the key back around his neck. Julian woke up to a follower count that had jumped by 40,000 overnight. His manager called it momentum. Julian called it a sequel. Monday, Elias found his supply closet locked from the outside with a bike chain. Tuesday, someone emptied an entire vat of pool chlorine tablets across the lobby he'd just finished mopping, and Julian filmed him kneeling in the white dust with a caption about spring cleaning. Wednesday brought a new game. Julian blocking the revolving door until Elias bowed to let him pass. Just tradition, old-timer. and the camera loved the way the old man's spine curved. Nadia brought it to Grant Wexler twice. Both times he studied his tablet until she stopped talking. The Cadies sponsor half the renovation budget, he said. Boys blow off steam. Elias hasn't complained. That part was true. Elias never complained. But Nadia had started something quiet of her own. Every night before the hotel's security system wiped its overnight footage, she copied the files onto a small drive she kept in her glove box. She didn't know why yet. She just knew somebody should. Thursday night, Elias sat in his truck in the employee lot too tired to drive home. He took the old phone out of his coat pocket, thumb finding its one saved voicemail in the dark without needing his eyes. Hey, Dad. It's me. We're stopping for gas outside Colorado Springs. Should be there by 6. Coach Vantree and Champion Vantree on the same trophy. That's going to look wild. Love you. Tell Mom I'm bringing it home. 19 years old, bright as a Tuesday morning. He listened twice. He did not cry. He'd done his crying in rooms this city never saw. He pressed save the way he always pressed save and drove home in the dark. By Friday, the numbers on Julian's clips were dipping, and he could feel the temperature drop the way champions feel everything, as a threat to be answered. He posted a poll. Should the doorman and I settle this on the mat? 91% said yes. He stared at the number with a strange heat behind his ribs, and somewhere in a room of himself he never visited, a small voice asked why an old man's calm bothered him this much. He muted it and went to find a chair to stand on. Saturday, the 14th floor gym filled early. Julian killed the music himself. Everybody gather up. Special guest tonight. 40 phones turned toward the doorman, who stood near the equipment rack holding a rolled towel because Julian had told the front desk Elias was needed to restock supplies. Doorman versus the champ, Julian announced, grinning at his own live stream number climbing in the corner of his screen. 60 seconds. Try to survive, Gramps. I don't fight, sir, Elias said. Of course you don't. Doormen don't fight, they hold doors. Julian peeled $500 off a money clip and slapped it against the cage wall. 500 says you can't lay a hand on me. Keep your money. Buy yourself a softer mattress. Why would I need that? Because everybody falls eventually, son. Some just haven't met the floor yet. The room went strange and quiet in the way rooms do when a script stops being followed. Julian laughed to cover it. Tomorrow. Noon. Right here. Elias set the towel down carefully, the way he set everything down, and walked toward the service elevator. Only his jaw had changed, set like a door closing for the last time. In the stairwell, alone, he pulled out his phone and looked at tomorrow's date in small gray numbers. April the 9th, his chest closed around a wound 6 years deep. April the 9th was the day the state police had come to his porch with their hats in their hands, the day a car that should have made it to Colorado Springs never did. Of all the days that boy could have chosen for his circus, Julian Cade had picked the anniversary of Ren Vantree's death. Sunday came up pale and cold. Before the sun cleared the mountains, Elias stood in Fairmount Cemetery with 2 folding chairs and 1 cup of coffee, 1 chair set by each of 2 stones. Colette Vantree, beloved wife. Ren Vantree, 19 forever. He drank half his coffee and poured the rest into the grass. They want me in a cage today, baby girl, he told the stone. On your day. The wind moved through the pines. He sat a long while before he spoke again. I'm not going to hurt that boy, he said finally. I'm going to introduce him to himself. From his truck he made 1 call, a number he hadn't dialed in 5 years. It rang twice. Coach? A voice like a man sitting down hard. Marcus, noon today the Ashcombe. I need a witness. A witness to what? 60 seconds. At home he opened the closet and took down a canvas bag stiff with disuse. He packed his old gi, white, gone the color of old paper. He left the belt in the trunk. He would not wear rank against a boy who didn't understand what rank cost. Defense only, he promised the empty house. Not 1 strike. By 11:30, the 14th floor was packed past capacity, and the internet, thousands of it, streaming live through Julian's phone, propped against the cage, was waiting for a beating. It was going to get a lesson instead. Julian bounced in his corner in a fresh sponsor's jacket, rolling his neck for the cameras. The $500 sat folded under a water bottle at the cage door. Grant Wexler stood where managers stand when they want to be seen and never blamed. At 2 minutes to noon, the crowd parted, laughing, phones raised, and the laughter stuttered. Elias Vantree walked through in a faded white gi, barefoot, no belt. Something about the way he moved confused the room. No shuffle, no hesitation, each step landing quiet and exact, weight pouring foot to foot like water finding its level. In the back row, a broad-shouldered man in a gray jacket and went very still. "Nice pajamas, old man," Julian called. 60 seconds, 60 seconds. "Try to survive." 60 seconds, Elias agreed. "Try to listen." "Listen to what?" "Your own breathing, son. It's about to get loud." Grant stepped forward to referee, raised an uncertain hand, and dropped it. Somebody started a phone timer. 60 seconds began. Julian came out fast, faked a jab, and threw the cross that had ended 9 professional careers. It found nothing. Elias's head had already moved off the line by 4 inches. No more, no less. The room heard the whisper of bare feet before it understood what it was hearing. A hook cut through the space where his ribs had been half a second earlier. A leg kick swept over a head that had already dipped politely under it. Elias never blocked. Blocking, he'd tell his students later, is for people who show up late to their own defense. 20 seconds in, the live stream chat had stopped joking. "Is this real?" someone typed. "He's a ghost," someone else wrote. The counter rolled past 60,000. At 31 seconds, Julian abandoned striking and shot for a double leg, diving at the old man's knees. What happened next would be replayed 9 million times in slow motion. Elias dropped his hips, caught the incoming shoulders, turned, just turned, and let Julian's own speed lift him over a quiet hip and lay him flat on his back. The sound went through the cage floor like a dropped piano. 300 people inhaled at once and nobody exhaled. "Breathe, son," Elias said, offering an open hand. "The floor caught you. That's all that happened." Julian slapped the hand away and came up wild. No technique left in him now, just 200 pounds of humiliation reaching for something to hurt. Elias stepped off the line, guided the reaching arm past its target, and let momentum finish its own sentence. Julian hit the mat and slid to a stop at the foot of his own tripod, his live camera looking down at him, 80,000 strangers looking with it. 10 seconds left. Julian rose with something loose behind his eyes, grabbed a water bottle off the cage wall, and swung it at the old man's skull. The room screamed. Elias swayed inside the arc, trapped the swinging arm, and turned his hip one final time. But this throw was different. Halfway through the fall, Julian's head was aimed at the concrete lip beyond the mat. Elias's palm shot out, cupped the back of the boy's neck, pulled him in, and gave the fall back to soft vinyl instead. He laid him down like something fragile. The timer sang. 60 seconds finished. Elias Vantree had not thrown a single strike. He bowed to the boy, gasping at his feet, picked up his bag, left the $500 untouched under the water bottle, and walked through a silence you could have framed. At the edge of the crowd, Desmond started clapping, alone at first. Then the whole room, a rolling thunder that Julian would hear behind his eyes for weeks. In the back, the man in the gray jacket, Marcus Judah, whom half the room now recognized, didn't clap. He just watched the white gi disappear down the hall and murmured, "Still perfect," to nobody at all. By evening, the internet had crowned him. Slow-motion breakdowns, freeze frames of an old hand catching a young man's neck mid-fall, martial arts channels calling it mastery you cannot buy. 5 million views under one repeated question. Who is the doorman? 40 floors up in his downtown office, Roman Cade watched his son slide across a mat on a phone screen, twice, without calling to ask if he was hurt. He scrolled instead to a name his money kept on speed dial, a name that had made lawsuits, rivals, and inconvenient stories disappear before. "I need you to destroy a doorman," he told the woman who answered. Celeste Winthrop didn't take cases, she took territory. By Monday morning, she sat across from Roman in his glass office, the live stream frozen on the wall screen. Your son challenged him publicly, she said. 300 witnesses. He swung a water bottle at the man's skull. This is unwinnable as written. Roman slid a folder across the desk. Then we don't fight the truth, he said. We replace it. The folder held the architecture of a lie, a real medical report showing a sprained shoulder and bruised vertebrae from 3 uncontrolled falls, and a 90-second edit. The shove gone, the bet gone, the swinging bottle gone, that left only an old man in strange white clothing throwing a young athlete onto his neck 3 times while children watched. Hidden fighter assaults local champion, the caption wrote itself. By Thursday, a local news segment ran it with the words disturbing and concealed doing most of the work. The 5 million views of the truth were buried under 30 million views of the lie. Elias arrived at work at 5 the next morning and found his key no longer fit the service door. Grant Wexler met him in the parking garage with an envelope and a speech he'd clearly practiced badly. Liability issue, he said. Insurance. Nothing personal. He lowered his voice. They want a public apology. Say you provoked him. Say you're sorry. And the lawsuit goes away, and your pension stays intact. Elias looked at the envelope. 11 years folded into 2 weeks of severance. I stood at that door 11 years, he said. Never once let it slam on a child's fingers. You tell Mr. Cade my knees don't bend that direction. He handed the envelope back unopened and walked to his truck. The summons came Saturday by certified mail. Cade v. Vantree. Damages sought. $650,000. Elias read it twice at his kitchen table. Pension statement, even winning would bankrupt him. That night, the old doubts came back wearing new clothes. He'd walked away from teaching once because the mat had taken his daughter. Now he'd stepped on one for 60 seconds, and it was coming for the rest of him. His house, his name, his quiet. He took the old phone out that night and held his thumb over the voicemail. And, for the first time in 6 years, didn't press play. He was afraid of what he'd hear underneath it. Not Wren's voice, his own failure, still waiting there. He was sitting alone with cold coffee and the summons Monday night when headlights swept the window. Then a second pair, then a third. The knock, when it came, was soft. He opened the door to find 3 people standing on his porch in the dark and 6 years standing behind them. Marcus Judah, shoulders filling the doorway. Selena Voigt, silver medalist posture even in sweatpants. Dario Fenn, tailored coat over gym clothes, a gold medal from 2 Olympics ago, tucked somewhere in a drawer he rarely opened. Selena stepped forward first and hugged him so hard the porch light shook. You stopped answering letters, coach, she said into his shoulder. So we stopped writing, we came instead. They sat in his kitchen until 2 in the morning. Marcus had flown in for the fight and stayed for the lawsuit, calling the others the night the doctored clip dropped. Elias tried twice to send them home. This is my mess, he said. Dario set his coffee down. Coach, you taught us the first rule of the corner. Nobody fights alone. For once, the old man ran out of arguments. The hearing room was small, but the story wasn't. Judge Priscilla Hartwell, a woman with reading glasses and no patience for theater, called the room to order. Roman Cade sat behind his lawyer like a man who had already read the ending. Julian sat beside him in a sling that hung a little too loosely to be believed. Elias came alone in a borrowed suit, representing himself because he could afford nothing else. Celeste Winthrop worked the room like a scalpel, playing the 90-second cut twice, using the phrase concealed combat training 4 times. Mr. Vantree, what belt do you hold? I hold no belt, ma'am. Oh. What rank did you hold? Answer the question. Black belt. 2 disciplines. A murmur. She turned to the judge. A man with that training is a weapon, Your Honor. A weapon that worked beside children for 11 years without disclosure. She turned back. Why does a master spend 11 years opening car doors, Mr. Vantree? What were you hiding from? For the first time, his hands tightened on the table. The room leaned in. Even Judge Hartwell looked up from her notes. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Some doors don't open in public. Winthrop smiled at the silence and let it work for her. No further questions. That was when the doors at the back of the room opened for real. Marcus Judah walked up the aisle in a state athletics jacket, and half the courtroom recognized him before he reached the front. Two-time national middleweight champion, current head coach at the state university. He asked to be heard as a character witness, and curiosity beat procedure enough for Judge Hartwell to allow it. "My name is Marcus Judah," he said, looking straight at the press row. "The man you've been calling a hidden threat is Elias Vantree. We called him the Quiet Hand. He trained me from a 15-year-old nobody into a national champion. He also trained Selena Voigt and Dario Fenn." He paused. "Stand up." Two people rose in the gallery, and a murmur became a roar. The judge had to gavel down. Selena Voigt, Olympic silver, 2 world titles. Dario Fenn, undefeated for 11 years, owner of 9 gyms across 4 states. Winthrop was on her feet objecting to relevance. Judge Hartwell peered over her glasses. "Counselor, you spent 40 minutes arguing this man's training history. His training history just stood up." Overruled. "You asked what he was hiding from," Marcus said, voice dropping. "I'll answer it, because he never will. 6 years ago, Coach had a 4th student, the best of us. His daughter, Wren. 19 years old. She died in a crash outside Colorado Springs, driving to the regional finals he'd spent 10 years preparing her for." He looked at Elias, and his voice broke on the next sentence. "He buried his little girl on a Tuesday, locked his belt in a trunk, never taught again. He didn't quit because he was dangerous. He quit because he couldn't forgive himself. There's a difference." At his table, Elias looked down at his open hands. The hands that had taped Wren's wrists before every tournament, that had carried the small casket. Nobody in that room had ever seen him cry, and they didn't now, but his shoulders dropped, finally, like a man setting down something he'd carried up a very long hill. A reporter in the 3rd row wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Julian stared at the old man's back, and the sling on his arm suddenly weighed 100 pounds. Then the second door opened. Nadia Osman came up the aisle holding a small silver drive like it was made of glass. She had quit the Ashcombe that morning by text message. Under oath, she told the court about the retention policy Grant had quietly enforced, and the copies she'd made anyway. Judge Hartwell ordered the footage played, the full Saturday, the shove that started everything, the $500, the taunts, the water bottle swinging at a gray head, and then the frame she asked to see twice. An old hand catching the back of a young man's neck, pulling him away from concrete, laying him down on soft vinyl like something worth saving. When the lights came up, nobody spoke for 3 full seconds. In the gallery, Desmond's mother stood and said, loud enough for the record, "That man is the only adult at that hotel who ever noticed my son." Judge Hartwell let it stand. Winthrop asked for a recess. She got 10 minutes. It took 4. Whatever was said at the plaintiff's table was said through clenched teeth, and when the room reconvened, she stood with a face like wet cement. "Your Honor, my client moves to withdraw the complaint with prejudice." Judge Hartwell removed her glasses. "I imagined he might." She looked at Roman Cade for a long, unhurried moment. "This court also imagines the city attorney will enjoy the question of who edited that video. Withdrawal granted." The room began to move, reporters racing for the hallway, Roman already barking at his lawyer. Elias sat still, Selena's hand on his shoulder. 6 years of silence broken open in a single morning, and then a chair scraped. Julian Cade was on his feet. He pulled the sling over his head, dropped it on the table, and said 5 words nobody expected. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Judge Hartwell could have refused. She looked at the boy standing without his sling and nodded once. Julian didn't approach the stand. He turned to face the gallery and the cameras he'd spent years feeding. "Everything Coach Judah said is true. Everything Ms. Osman showed you is true. I shoved him because he opened doors for a living, and I thought that meant something about who he was." His voice cracked, and he let it. "He never threw one strike at me. The last fall, I was headed straight into concrete. He caught me. The man I was trying to destroy caught me." He turned to Elias last. "I picked the 9th for the fight. I didn't know what that date was. Now I do, and I can't give it back." He bowed, clumsy and unpracticed, the first honest bow of his life. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vantree." Elias studied him a long moment and said nothing at all. Some apologies have to season before they're answered. The consequences arrived like dominoes that had been waiting politely in line. The athletic commission reviewed the raw footage and stripped Julian's ranking for conduct, the swung bottle alone ending the debate. His sponsors were gone within a week. Roman Cade's business partners, smelling weather, pulled out of 2 downtown projects, and the hotel board voted Grant Wexler out before the next Tuesday's lunch meeting. Nadia turned down 3 job offers from local news stations and took one from a law firm instead. 2 weeks later, the Ashcombs board called Elias into the office that used to ignore him completely and offered him a new position. Director of the hotel's athletic club, full salary, his choice of hours. "I'll take it," he said, "on one condition. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, the mat belongs to the neighborhood. Free self-defense classes for any kid who walks in. No fees, no cuts." They agreed before he finished the sentence. "One more thing," he added. "It needs a name. The Ren Vantree program." Nobody argued with that. On the first night, 30 children sat cross-legged on the mat, Desmond front and center in a borrowed ga, 2 sizes too big. Elias walked in carrying the wooden trunk and a small hammer. He drove a nail into the wall by the door and hung a photograph face out, where it would watch every class from now on. A girl of 19 grinning under a tournament banner, forever about to win. Then in front of everyone, he opened the trunk, lifted out the belt, and tied it around his waist with hands that did not shake. "First lesson," he told them, his voice carrying to the corners the way it used to. "The strongest thing you'll ever learn on this mat is how to walk away from a fight. The second strongest is how to make sure you can." 30 heads nodded like it was scripture. In the doorway, Marcus grinned at Selena. The quiet hand was loud again. He was halfway through teaching falls when the door opened. Julian Cade stood there in plain gray sweats. No logo, no entourage, no camera. The room went still. Every child in it knew his face. He crossed to the edge of the mat, stopped at the tape line like a man at a border, and bowed. "Mr. Vantree, teach me the right way. I'll start from nothing." Elias looked at him a long moment, then pointed toward the supply closet. "Grab a mop first," he said. "The floor teaches humility before anything else does." Julian Cade, former undefeated prospect, walked to the closet and picked up a mop in front of 30 children. And here is the strange part. Nobody laughed. The boy who had filmed an old man falling now moved a bucket in careful, even lines while the old man taught children how to stand. 6 months later, on a cold evening in October, the lights of the Ashcombs' 14th floor burned warm against the dark, and through the glass you could see the mat crowded with 50 children now, lines that had started crooked in April and stood straight by fall. The program had a waiting list, then a second location, then a third, each one opened by a phone call. Elias never had to make himself. Marcus taught Tuesdays. Selena flew in monthly to teach falling, which she called the most honest skill on earth. Dario paid every bill quietly and refused every interview about it. Julian was there most nights, easy to miss now, which was new for him. He mopped the mats before class and after, in long even arcs that never crossed their own path, because he'd asked the old man to show him how. His followers had thinned to a fraction of what they'd been. He hadn't posted once since the courthouse steps. A reporter cornered him once in the parking lot and asked if this was a redemption arc. Julian thought about it. "No," he said. "It's just Tuesdays." Elias still arrived at 5 every morning. Some habits are load-bearing. He still read a room the way he'd once read a floor, still noticed which kid finally kept her chin down. The photograph by the door stayed turned outward now, and some nights, alone after the last student left, he talked to it. Small things, scores and stances, which kid had earned her first stripe. On April the 9th, the program held no classes. The mat stayed empty, and the lights stayed on, one night a year, for a girl who never got to arrive. Nobody had to schedule it. Everybody just honored it. People still stop Elias on the street sometimes and ask about the 60 seconds, hungry for the part with the throws. He tells them all the same thing. The fight was never the point. For 11 years, a master opened car doors in silence, and nobody asked his name. It took 60 seconds of humiliation to make the world curious about a man that 11 years of kindness should have already revealed. I've spent a long time with this story, turning it over the way you'd turn a stone looking for the smooth side. And here's the part I can't let go of. Somewhere in your city right now, there's a doorman, a night shift janitor, an old man behind a counter, carrying a whole legend around quietly, and nobody's bothered to ask. So if you were Elias, standing in that lobby with 40 phones laughing at you, would you have walked onto that mat? Or would you have just kept opening the door? Tell me in the comments. I think the answer says more about us than it ever did about him.